Hey, today we're talking about castles. I've got a book about castles. Percy Penguin's listening. Billy Goat Gruff's listening. Jerry Giraffe's listening to more granny stories. Are we ready? Okay, here we go.
Go.
The ruins of a huge stone castle stand on a hill. Hundreds of years ago, a castle like this was full of people. Castles were built for rich people like kings and queens. Servants worked and lived in the castle grounds. There's a big wall around. Soldiers guarded the castle gate. There they are, guarding the gates there. And a thick wall like this was built to keep the enemies out. The castle's main tower here was called a keep. Some castles were made of wood. The keep was built on a high mound of earth, like that. Other castles were made of stone. They had strong towers and thick walls like that. And building a castle sometimes took more than 20 years. No wonder he looks tired. Some castles has waters around them. This is called a moat, as you know. The moat helped to keep out the enemies. But people crossed the moat on a wooden platform called the drawbridge. The drawbridge was pulled up quickly with chains if the enemy came near. There's the enemy. The keep. There were lots of rooms inside the keep, and the best rooms belonged to the lord and lady or the king and queen and his family. There's a bedroom. There's a great hall. There's a chapel and the guard's room. And there's a storeroom. Castles were always full of rats. Can you spot 10 rats in a keep? Can you spot any up here? Can you spot any in the bedroom? Ooh, I'm just looking around the bed. On top of the bed, I think I've seen something. Can you see any in the great hall? I can see a couple running around there. Any here? Can you see any in the chapel? How about the storeroom? Because that's where all the wheat and the grain and the food was stored. Rats like all that, don't they, to nibble? Castle toilet was just a hole in the floor, and underneath was a chute, like a slide, that just led to a pit outside. Ooh, don't like that idea. Castle owners lived in comfortable rooms. They slept in big, soft beds like this one, and curtains around the bed that kept them snug and warm. But the servants had to sleep on the hard, cold floor. Look at them, they've just got a bit of straw there. Not like that lovely big bed. Stone castles could be damp and chilly, and huge big fires helped to keep the rooms warm. People had to have baths, but they had them in big wooden tubs in those days, long ago. The servants heated the water over the fire. Castles were noisy places. Servants worked, children played games, and dogs barked. Can you see all the dogs there? Running around, barking. Children playing. There were no television in castle times. People had to find other things to do. There were acrobats, often visited the castles to put on shows. There they are standing on each other's shoulders. There's somebody juggling, like Tom Thumb. There's somebody on stilts. The jugglers juggled with balls or even knives. And musicians sang songs and played instruments. Many castles had a jester. His job was to tell jokes and make everybody laugh. This picture was painted about 700 years ago. It shows a group of musicians playing tunes for the king. Got all the different instruments. It's still a little bit like our instrument today. Do you know what that's called today? Hunting. The lords and ladies and the kings and queens enjoyed hunting. Birds called falcons were trained to hunt. And here are the 4 stages of training a falcon. The falcon had to get used to being carried around on a hand and fed. Then it was kept on a rope and it flew after little bits of food. Next, the falcon was able to fly freely. Still got its bit of rope on, hasn't it? The falcon killed small birds next and came back to its owner. You see the little bird that it's managed to capture. A hood helped to keep the falcon calm when it was taken out to be trained. Look, it's even got little feathers on the top of its hood. It was very, very fashionable to own a falcon, and people took them everywhere. The kitchen was a building in the castle grounds. All the meals were made there, and meat was roasted on a fire on a stick called a spit. This is how part of a castle kitchen might have looked. You see all the food in sacks and jugs and bowls. And there's a big fire. To bake bread, bakers lit a fire in the oven to heat it up. They mixed the dough for bread and made it into loaves. Just like you mix pizza dough, don't you now? The loaves went into the oven when the fire died down and the oven was still hot and the bread soon cooked. Castles didn't have fridges, so food went bad very quickly, so cooks added spices to the food to disguise the horrible taste sometimes if the food went off. Ooh. Huge meals called feasts were served in the great hall of the castle, and all the guests sat at the high tables like this. Oh, like that, that's the high table. Everybody else sat in benches. People ate lots and lots of meat and fish, and the cooks decorated food with feathers and fruit. You see all the feathers that they put on. Amazing models made of sugar and paper were carried in to the feast to impress the guests. So there was a castle, and it was made of sugar and paper. Here are the knights. The knights, that's the knights like in Meg and Mog's story, isn't it? The knights were rich, important soldiers, and they helped to protect the castle against all the enemies, like the Green Knight. The knights had shapes or pictures on their shields, and each knight had his own pattern. Oh, look at this knight's pattern. It looks like a golden eagle on his shield. So when he got ready to fight, first the knight had to put on a thick padded vest. Then he wore a shirt made of metal. Then metal plates covered his arms and legs and chest. Then he put on a long top and big gloves. Next he wore a heavy helmet put on his head, and he carried a shield to protect him. A joust was a pretend fight between two knights. The knights held long poles, lances like that. They rode on strong horses called chargers, and the winner of jousts won a prize. Sometimes he won the losing knight's horse and weapons. The two knights charged up to each other on a narrow track. Each knight tried to push the other one off the horse with his lance. Look at them. The knight who was able to stay on his horse was the winner. Can you see the winner in this one? Yeah. Sometimes castles were attacked. Enemies used to often pull machines called a catapult. There's a wooden catapult. They pulled the big lever back. They loaded it with heavy rocks. Then they let the lever spring up and the rocks hit the castle wall. Enemies often catapulted dead animals into castles to spread diseases. Oh. This old painting shows a huge battle in front of a castle as the enemy tries to take the tower. Lots and lots of knights there trying to get into the tower and the castle. Soldiers tried to keep their castle safe from the enemies. They dropped rocks or boiling water onto the heads of the enemies who came near. Just like that Meg and Mog story, isn't it? There they are dropping the rocks, and here's the enemies trying to get up the ladder. Sometimes the enemies tried to sneak into castles in disguise. The soldiers were armed with bows and very sharp arrows, and they fired arrows through the thin slits of the wall in the castle. This castle here has so many arrow slits in its walls. Soldiers also shot arrows from the roof. Can you see somebody up on the roof there? Most castles are now empty. They've crumbled over the years, hundreds and hundreds of years. And this is a castle in Wales called Raglan Castle. And it might have looked like that 400 years ago, but this is how it looks now. You see how the walls crumbled a bit. Some castles were destroyed by enemies in attacks. This castle was blown up, but part of it still stands. A few castles have still been rebuilt for people to live in still. And that is the end of the story, all about castles.